Hello, thanks for tuning in to this month's feedback video for August Draw Along Challenge. Last month I gave you this reference of wrestlers to sort of go with our Olympics theme that we were doing throughout July and August. And yeah, it was a challenging pose. I sort of gave you some ideas to think about while you were drawing it. And we have several submissions. I think we've got 4 this month, so we can jump right into those and see what you guys did. Up first we have Stuart's submission, and it looks great. I can see that Stuart, like always, has done 2 little smaller thumbnail sketches, sort of working it out. And I think that's really awesome when you're drawing something difficult. Like, this is a difficult reference that I give you this month. Anytime there's 2 figures working together, it's really challenging. And in the past I've sort of given you like I think I gave you like a couple set where it was like a man and a woman, and they were like acting together, but they weren't as physically connected as this reference. Here we have, 2 athletes. One is like throwing the other, so it's a very connected kind of feeling. So it's a lot more difficult than maybe the couple poses that we did several months ago. So anytime you're drawing something that is particularly challenging for you, and drawing 2 figures like this is challenging for most people, including myself, doing little thumbnail sketches to sort of plan it out, think it through, that's absolutely great. And especially when you are drawing from reference, when you're not on a time limit like in a life drawing room, just take the time and work it out, think some things through, play with some ideas, and then when you go into the bigger gesture, you can like explore a little bit more and sort of just draw with a little bit more confidence. So Stuart's done an awesome job here. I can see there's a lot of movement in all 3 of these sketches here. I can see that like the line work in the final one is a bit more confident because of like the exploration, but there's still some areas where we've got like 3 feet on the bottom left here, which is like, I totally don't mind that, because it's like you're laying it in, and then as you get there you change it. And I love to see people sort of pivoting and trying something again. That's the benefit of, or like the freedom that we can have with gestures, is it's not locked in like a long study that needs to be accurate and like proper. Here we can have 3 feet on one leg and we'll pick the one that works the best for us. So let's get in a little bit closer with Stuart's big drawing here. So what I love most about Stuart's drawing here is that there really is, there's great negative space. It reads so well. It would be very easy for this drawing to get very muddy and confused, but there's a real solid feeling of 3D space. I really feel like the blue guy is like in front of the red guy, and that the red guy's arms are like locked around the waist. And like we have that, organization of forms, one player in front of the other, but also within each athlete, you've got that layering. For example, in the arm here, you're using the lines so well here to have a sense of depth, and you're doing it so efficiently. And I can see you're starting to bring in some of that triceps. I see you working with simplifying and stylizing the anatomy, which I remember you did that in the last one as well, Stuart. So this is looking really good. It reads so clearly and so efficiently. Like, you're doing it with minimal lines, but it works so effectively. So I think that's all looking really good. Lots of depth, lots of negative space. So the image has a lot of space to breathe, which is great. So this top arm works really well for me. When I look at some of the other arms in the image, they're not as like appealing to look at. So like this arm in the back on the same guy, I can see you're doing the same overlapping technique, but it just doesn't look as visually appealing. Like, the shapes that you've chosen aren't as attractive as the ones on top. So try to like mirror that. Like, I don't know which arm you drew first, but if you drew this top one first, then it looked really good. Then when you go to draw your opposite arm, reference your first arm so that you're using similar shapes, similar sizes, similar techniques. So I would love to sort of see, like I can see on the reference over here on the left, we've got a little bit of that tricep in here. I would love to see that the same way you had it here. And then we've got that bicep coming towards the elbow, and then the forearm you do have the shape on the forearm. The forearm looks good. And then I know this hand is a blurred hand, but maybe just like the oversimplification of the mitten over here. It's a shame just to leave it like that when I know you can do something really good. So your hand on the top looks awesome. So could you just, you know, make this up, just match your mitten from the top and put it on the bottom for that extra gesture, thinking that, you know, he's probably throwing his hand out to catch himself when he hits the floor. So just a little bit of like a connection between the choices you're making from one half of the anatomy to the other half. So whether that's the arms, the legs, the pecs, the scapula, whatever it is left to right, just try to like balance out their design and their shape language and everything so that they really, the whole image really like meshes well. So that would be my first thing for you, Stuart. And then my second note would be just to help you with the foreshortening on some things. So I'm mostly looking at this thigh on the bottom guy here, where this is the part of the photo reference that has the most foreshortening on it. And the reason it's not working so well on your sketch here, and actually if we zoom down into your little thumbnail here, I can see you drawing the cylinder really open and like the contour lines are really open, and that's correct. You're even doing it on this one. So I think you know to do it, but there's so much to think about when you're drawing this that we just lost it on that leg. So I think you understand why it's not working here. Maybe you just hadn't noticed that you'd kind of missed it on this larger sketch. But yeah, keeping that open, looking at that reference over here, that we're really looking down the length of that cylinder. So those ellipses may be overlapping a little bit. So we really want the clothing, it's the clothing especially, we have the foreshortening, we have the shortened limb, but the clothing isn't matching the shortening. So they're working against each other. So what this reads as is like he has a really short thigh. It's because this line is so flat. So like I said, I think you know to do this. You just forgot on this larger one, so I won't harp on about it too much. You can use your overlapping forms here. So just opening that clothing a little bit more. The other leg, I don't think you need it so much. I think this thigh could be like a little bit larger, like push out that quad a little bit, and then even give like a little bit of a sense of like a back plane to those hamstrings, and then turning across the top of the quads there. So we have a little bit of a corner here rather than the simple C curve there. So just bulking out the muscles for these athletes a little bit. This is a really awkward leg in the reference, and I think you've managed it pretty well. It kind of feels like the toes are going away from us, like not towards us. Something to do with like the bottom plane of this foot perhaps. So we just want to really make sure we're feeling the heel here and the toes here. So it's just looking a little bit over rotated, and if that happened, you know, his knee would be a little bit broken. So we just want to watch out for those little things. I know like the feet are a little bit tricky. There is a foot tutorial, how to draw the feet anatomy, coming up in September, so watch out for that. I can give you some hints on how to draw things like this sort of efficiently and quickly. I also find like their shoes, like the wrestling shoes, are tricky to draw. Like there's a lot, they don't have as much structure as like a fashion shoe, and there's lots of design and stuff, so they are a little bit hard to read. But just something to keep in mind there. And then one more thing for you, Stuart, is just for your calves. I love the shape language that you're using here. I think we saw that on your last submission as well, which I really liked. The only thing with calves, just generally, when we're drawing the knee, then we have the tibia coming down like this, that's the shin bone, and then we have the fibula coming down on the outside, and then our foot is here. When we're drawing the calf, it's actually two heads, two muscles, just like the bicep is two muscles, the calf is two. and they're actually offset a little bit. So when you're just drawing your shape language for the outside foot, sorry, this is the outside leg. So imagine you're looking at someone standing up. This is the inside of the knee. This is the outside of the knee. This is their little toe. This is their big toe. So the tilt of those two heads is actually like this. So we just want a little bit of like the peak of that head of the calf on the back be high on one side and then be a little bit lower on the other side. And to be fair, like in the reference, they kind of look like they are like matching, but this is where your knowledge of what you're trying to like say can override what you're actually referencing. And it's just like a design thing. What we get when we have these 2 points be in line is a symmetry, and that's just it takes away the movement, and it also is like less visually appealing. So we want contrast, we want asymmetry, because our bodies are actually designed like that, and visually that's what we like to look at. So I would just take this little peak of the calf muscle and just raise it a little bit higher, and then the other one can stay where it is. That's fine. So now we have like this offset, and that's just more appealing. And if you're ever not sure like which way does it tilt, it's opposite to the ankle. So you see this lovely, again, this asymmetry, this counterbalance that we have that ripples throughout the whole body. So if you're ever unsure on the calf, think about your ankle bone. You can look down at your own feet and realize that the one on the inside is higher and the ankle bone on the outside is lower. So the calves are going to be opposite that. Sometimes I'll just draw this little thing on the side and just draw these tilts so that I'm like thinking it through properly. Other than that, Stuart, I think this looks really good. So voluminous and solid, and they feel meaty and like a lot of weight, a lot of movement, and yeah, it looks awesome. Really good job. Next up we have Lawrence, and just like always, we've got several attempts at it, which is awesome. So I'm not sure which one was first, but we've got some notes down here from Lawrence. I think I'm getting the hang of this, which is awesome. I love to know that you're feeling that shift in your abilities and your understanding. And for, I think, everyone who's submitted here today, like you guys always submit, so it's like that consistency and also getting that feedback that is like, you know, it may not hit immediately, but over time and with repetition, it will start to work. So I can already see in your sketches here, Lawrence, that there's way less lines than you normally do. There's more control. You're really thinking about the silhouette and the form a little bit more. So huge improvement. I can really see like how you've grown in the last few months. So we have these two here, and yeah, it looks like the one on the left was from another reference from the Pinterest board. The one on the right is this reference that we are drawing, and then the second one, it looks like you've done this for 2 hours. I think that is what that says. Trying to use the force technique. How is it different from Riley rhythms? Okay, good questions. So there's different books out there for anyone who's not familiar with maybe force or Riley rhythms. There's lots of books on how to draw that have been made over hundreds of years. But in the last 100 to 150 years, there's a few books that are like go-to ones for techniques on how to draw the figure. One of them is the Riley method. We also have the Loomis method, Hogarth method maybe. But they're sort of like these institutional books that are like always used and taught at school. I personally never learnt the Riley rhythms, so I can't actually talk directly to them too much for you, Lawrence. But I'll have a think and I'll do some research on that, and that would actually maybe be an interesting video to do, sort of to compare some of these methods, because it's good to expose yourself to different ones because not everyone thinks the same. So when someone breaks down something in one way, it may not make sense to a certain person, but then when it's broken down by a different artist with a sort of different perception, that does make sense. So it's good to expose yourself to some different ones. You've capitalized force, so I'm presuming that you mean the Mike force, so we can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I can't compare it to the Riley rhythms because I'm not familiar. I haven't studied that one. So let's start maybe with your sketch first, and I'm just gonna do this one because I don't have the reference for the other one. So yeah, it's looking really good. Same thing as Stuart. I really feel like each player has like their own space. One is really in front of the other. I'm really feeling like the connection here. All these forms, and like I love this line, this one line here. Like that's all you've got there to describe that back, and it's all you need. Before you'd have drawn that with 40 lines, and now you've just sort of captured it with one. So I love seeing that your line efficiency is improving, Lawrence. That's really cool. But lovely big C curve in here. I think you've lifted his shoulders up more, which is absolutely fine. It's just like sort of a different moment of the action, so you're sort of exaggerating it a little bit more. And then to compare this line, we've got this guy going this way. So it's great. We've got those like opposite forces. This red guy is stretching through his front line, where this one is stretching through his back line, because they're both doing opposite things. One's pulling and one's being pulled, so it's a different sort of physics. So that's nice. You've got that comparison and that contrast super clear. Got really nice negative space in here as well. You've maintained that all the way through. You're using the clothing well, like the clothing on this blue guy I think works well. Again, I think you've adjusted the pose so it reads more like his thighs are going away from us, which is fine, because in the reference it's kind of like middle-ish. It's like just on that flat. So I like to see that you've made that decision to take it the other way. And yeah, that's looking really good. One area we can speak about is just around the shoulders here. So I'm just feeling like the deltoid here, the bicep here, and sort of the back of the armpit here are like not quite meshing together. So I'm just gonna do a very simple breakdown of like how to think about this shoulder area. I have a video called how to draw the shoulder girdle. It's an anatomy video. You can find it in the anatomy section. And in brief, we're kind of thinking about the shoulders like a shelf, like it's the top plane of our torso. So for example, just like a flat 2D rectangle here. So this would be like if we were standing up, you could put, you know, a cup of tea or some books on here. It's like a flat shape. And then we want to build our shoulders around that. So we've got our acromion process. That's sort of the side planes of this rectangle here. And our deltoids are going to come out of here. So I just want you to have like a fixed position for your deltoids to begin, because it's the same on everybody, because it's connected to this part of our skeleton. So I want you to try to find these landmarks, Lawrence, when you're drawing next time, when you have an opportunity to see the shoulders from an angle like this. Find these 2 points. They may be slightly hidden, but interpret where they're going to be and let your deltoids come out of there. And then your scapula is coming around the back here. And your deltoid is wrapping around like this. So I just think we can have a little bit more believability around the organization of your shoulders specifically. So that's a little bit of anatomy. There's a whole video on it. I won't go into the whole thing right here. But that's the most important thing, these 2 little landmarks. And make sure they're nice and wide. It's actually wider than our rib cage because it's part of the shoulder girdle. So it's sort of like what do you call them from like blazers? Shoulder pads that go on top, or like football player armor, you know, what do they call it? Just shoulder pads. They go on top, so they sit on top of the rib cage. So we just want them to be like away from the neck enough so that there's space for those. So that was me just drawing it out of my head a little bit. Let's actually go over to the reference. So these points I'm talking about are here. There's a little dip there in his anatomy. And here, there's a little dip there as well. And the deltoids are coming out of there towards the middle of the arm. And then our scapula is, this is like quite a blurry photo, but I'm seeing some dents here. So that is probably his arms, his scapula is swinging out. So just a little bit of awareness of some of these landmarks, and you don't need to know like the whole thing in detail, but I feel like the deltoids are such a key shape for drawing our shoulders and our silhouette, that if we can just understand like these two landmarks and how the deltoids come from that point, it's going to make our drawings a little bit easier to track and also invent when we want to draw our own stuff. So check out that video, Lawrence, the how to draw the shoulder girdle. I'd also recommend revisiting the pelvis. I know the pelvis is like really tricky, but looking at your red guy, just this whole area is a little bit like empty. We need a little bit more feeling of some landmarks, some angles, so that we're feeling his legs. Right now his legs feel like he's kind of got little legs. The guy on the top, his legs look great. You've got overlap, you've got form, you've got contours with the costume. It all looks really solid. The bottom guy, I think because the legs are in a more challenging position, they're just not quite reading. So similar notes to what I was saying to Stuart. You really want the foreshortening on this leg. So you're thinking about your cylinders coming through here. There's going to be a video released this week about how to draw these basic forms, these basic shapes, so you can reference that to help you. And then using the contours of the clothing, just like you did on the blue guy, to really describe that form. I'm thinking about maybe his pelvis being up like this. This is the front plane of the pelvis. We'd be seeing the underside of this plane a lot. It's the bottom of his crotch and his glutes here. This would be the center line. So his pubic bone would kind of be down here. So having a little bit of an understanding of that volume will help. But thank you for submitting again, Lawrence. It's always good to see your work. And yeah, your line work is looking much, much better. Okay, next up we've got Claire. Yeah, this is looking really good. Claire's used a lot more tone, a lot more detail in here than some of the other submissions, which is fine. I love how you're using tone to really push certain things into the background, like this arm, because the lighting in the reference, you know, there's not really, it's stadium lighting, so it's not very artistic or helpful. But the way that you're pushing this into the dark is really nice. I also like these back legs also, I like that a lot. And like here. So that's another tool that you can use, just like Claire is using here. Just a little bit of shading to push things into the background a little bit, along with the overlapping lines that I've seen Lawrence and Stuart both use. So you've got your overlapping lines, the little bit of tone, and it can just be like super light. You don't even need to go as dark, but just a little bit of shading just to optically push that into the distance a little bit and pull the rest into the foreground. That looks really good. Really nice shoulders over here. Again, you've got very simple lines, just like Stuart was using, but I can see your knowledge of like where stuff is underneath is really strong. So it's like making a lot of sense. It's really believable, not distracting at all, which is great. Overall, I'm feeling like the drawing, it's really beautiful. Like it has a lot of form and it's easy to read and understand, but it feels a little bit stiff. And I think that stiffness kind of comes from like the line work. I'm not sure how long you spent on it. It feels like maybe it's pushing, 7 minutes, 10 minutes sort of area, which sort of falls into like a little bit outside of like gestural. So if your goal is to be a little bit more gestural, Claire, and to like bring a little bit more movement, especially in such a dynamic pose like this, just be careful about having too heavy of an outline. So this line here, it's sort of, it just really locks in the form, this outline, and it makes a lot of the movement and the lightness and the flow kind of like disappear. So just if that is something that you're playing with, try to like lighten up on the outline. I wonder if you did it, like if those are how you place your lines, or if you actually went around again and like outlined it. I'd be interested to know that. You can let me know in the comments. But some people, and I know you're in France, Claire, and this can often be a habit sometimes of like French and Belgian artists, because a lot of the comics from there have like this outline and we want to like make it tidy and like finished. So I maybe just like resist doing that if that is something you did, Claire. Maybe you didn't do that and your line just goes down kind of bold like that. And also the shading, keep it a little looser. It's because you're doing like the cross hatching, it sort of creates this like it's a little bit heavy and it just kind of weighing down the pose a little bit. So I just think like be a little lighter with your lines. Like I can see you've got light lines like under here. I can see you've started there and you've built up. So just try to keep that lightness to all your lines. Even if you do want to go around and like touch it up a little bit, try to keep that line variety and quality, because what we've kind of got around the edge here is like a solid consistent line. It's almost like the same thickness all the way around, and that just like for the eye just removes some of the movement. So yeah, let me know what you think about that. It might be way off base, but let me know in the comments below. And then some things you can do to add a little bit more of a lightness to it. So with things like the feet, so coming through here, we sort of got like quite a lot of thickness down here and then kind of like this right angle. So it's just getting a bit like heavy again. So a bit like club footed, if you're familiar with that expression, Claire. So you just like taper a little bit at the ankles and curve that bottom foot and let the toes be a little bit more pointy. You could stylize it a little bit so it's less trying to draw like maybe like a shoe that you or I would wear, but like these little fitted shoes that the wrestlers are wearing. And just that like little curve allows the eye to sort of like flow around a little bit more. You could do the same thing with the bottom foot here. So rather than having like this kind of, it's a little bit more like clown shoey and this like firm right angle, just like relax it a bit and have a little bit more point. And that will just like help the flow kind of continue a little bit. Very good job on this foot though. This was a hard foot to draw, but you've done it really well. You can feel like that weight just on like the outer edge of his foot, which is great. You can even do it with the hands as well. Just let that, like maybe let those fingers like splay out a little bit, so there's just a little bit more continuation of that flow. And maybe he's panicking a little bit because he's being thrown, so you could like open those fingers even more. So just play around a little bit. Don't get too locked into what you're literally seeing in the reference, and think about how you can push it and add that sense of movement into it. And even in the reference, we're getting this blur on the back hand here, but ultimately like the flow feeling is kind of like this, right? As he's probably dragged his arm down, and this is sort of like creating a blur effect. In animation we call that a blur frame or a smudge frame. So with your hand over here, you know, if you're thinking about, you know, where he's coming from, why is there a blur in that picture, you could actually like bend those fingers like a little bit up so that we're getting like this curvature. So trying to find a little bit more of like, especially at the extremities there, like the hands and feet, allow the flow to continue. You know, like think about how the movement has moved through space, so we're not just like doing a dead stop at like the hands and the feet. Okay, but really nice work, really good anatomy, really good form. Everyone has had really good form so far, so it's looking really good. Thank you, Claire. Last up, we've got Bill. Let's see, we've got a 6B pencil on newsprint and 29 minutes. So when we're drawing longer, like anything over, I'd say, depending on your practice, definitely anything over 10 minutes is kind of going into like a long study. And it's very difficult to maintain like a gestural feeling in drawings that are longer than that. It's not impossible, but it's hard because you're spending so much time and you're probably being quite like nitpicky about it and maybe correcting a lot and erasing and trying it again and things like that. Like you're overthinking it. It's almost like, yeah, your brain is drawing it rather than like your hand. So a gesture is really about like feeling it. And I just don't know how we can like feel when it's sort of pushing like that 30-minute mark. So something just to consider, perhaps, Bill, if you're wanting to make your drawings a little bit more gestural, shorten that time. Maybe you don't have to jump down to like 5 minutes, but maybe jump down to like 10 minutes and try to chip off that time. And I know when we're drawing two figures as well, yeah, we maybe want to give ourselves a few extra minutes because we're drawing more stuff. But even though it is 29 minutes though, there is still a looseness to it. So you've actually got a very nice line quality. And Claire, if you're still watching, like this kind of line quality, you know, it's broken in places, it's light, then it's dark. That's actually what gives it like rhythm and movement, and that's kind of what we want rather than that like outlined sort of dead finished line. So one thing I think that we've lost a little bit in here, Bill, is the curvature of the red guy. I think your blue guy looks really good. We've got nice tilt here, we've got this C curve coming through, nice negative space between the limbs, some nice foreshortening on this back arm. Looks really good. But the bottom guy, and I wonder, you can let me know in the comments below, Bill, did you draw one figure and then draw the other figure, or did you kind of draw them both at the same time? Because sometimes that can help. So I feel like your blue guy has a lot of movement and is really close to the reference, whereas your red guy feels different. I feel like you've drawn him with a different mental space. So with the bottom guy, if we look at the reference here, we've got a wonderful like C curve. He's leaning back, he's leaning away from us. So we've got this huge C curve. If I draw just a vertical line through here, like between his head, his heel and his head, you can see that most of his body is like over here on the right side of that line, and it's really just like his shoulder and his leg dragging. So that's why he's got that C curve, because he's bending his torso way over to the right. When we look at your drawing, it's become a lot more vertical. He almost feels like he's standing upright. And maybe it actually almost, if you look at it at the whole image, it maybe looks like the blue guy is like jumping at him and he's actually being the one who's been hit rather than he's the one pulling. So I think a little bit of the intention has been lost because of the bottom figure. So we just want to make sure that we're like overlapping a little bit more. So you can pull that rib cage to be a little bit more shallow. And then the belly is like kind of in front. So we want to overlap those forms. I think we lost a little bit of that in your original sketch, Bill. And then we've spoken about it a few times now with the other artists. We want the foreshortening of that leg. So bring the knee way up, sort of like right by that bum cheek. The bottom leg is almost in full view, but it is still like coming towards us. We want a little bit of a sense of that. So I think we lost that a little bit in your sketch too, Bill. It just sort of looks like his leg is straight up and down. So you want a little bit of sense of that foreshortening. And then for his lower leg on the left here, more diagonal. So I think the bottom guy has just become victim to your eye wanting to straighten him up, and he's lost a lot of his movement and his force. So a little tip for that, when you're drawing two figures at once, is to really think about how they flow into one. Because I know you can do it because you've done the blue guy really, really well. His flow looks great. But something happened, and it might be because time has passed. You've been sitting with this figure for 20 minutes or so. And actually, I'm going to guess what happened here. Again, tell me in the comments below. Bill, I think you did the top one probably in like 5 minutes. And it's loose, it's free. And then the second one, I think you probably spent 25 minutes on. Am I right? I don't know. That's That's my theory. I could be wrong, but let me know. So just try to, whatever you were doing with the blue guy, let that continue into the red guy as well, and try to draw them both at the same time. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but I actually drew this pose as well for the wrestling video, and I can't remember how I draw it. I'm pretty sure I would have done the lines of action through both the figures first and then continued to add layers and layers on top. So if you haven't seen that, Bill, head back a few videos, look at the wrestling real-time gestures, scroll through until you find this reference and see how I drew them, like the two figures as one almost, to make sure that they felt connected and that the whole story was working together. Okay, so thank you for submitting as always, Bill. And thank you to Stuart, Lawrence and Claire as well. This was a hard gesture. A lot of people did not want to play. I thought people would have been excited to do this one, but maybe it was a little too intimidating. But thank you for playing. Everyone did like a really good job. Volume's looking great. Weight is looking great. A little bit of work to be done on foreshortening, I think, for most people. I have a couple of foreshortening videos. If you haven't watched the reclining figure, the reclining pose video from a few posts back, I touch on foreshortening in there as well. So if you need a little bit of a refresher, you can check out the reclined poses. And also the next draw along challenge is going to be a recline pose, so foreshortening is going to be in that challenge as well. So really recommend going back, watching one of the tutorial videos on that to make sure you're grasping it and practicing it a little bit. And then I know you four will probably submit again next month because you're my A-star students, and I hope to see some of those errors that maybe came up, especially with that red guy's thigh, not coming up as strongly in the next month's draw along challenge. So thank you again for submitting, and I will see you in the next one.